Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm better after that short dancing.
Yeah, that's true. It really does help. It really does.
Right? Like just that 10 seconds. I always tell clients a minute to 2 minutes, but
Mm,
really, even just 10 seconds
yeah,
of dancing it out is like, all right,
yeah.
that's good. Plus, I love our intro music, so it just makes me smile. It's
That's
like
true.
it comes on, and I'm like Pavlov's dog, like, oh, I get to talk to Shannon and our guest today.
That's funny. And for our listeners who don't know what Pavlov's dog is, it's about a research study where you condition the dog to know what's about to happen. And so Christine is saying that the music is a good thing.
Right? And then that
Yes.
the dog would get treats, and so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
always a treat to talk to you, my friend.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I love it.
Should we do our intro and kick off the show today?
Of course, ladies, welcome to Women Connected in Wisdom. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial business owner, the founder of ShealoGlo LLC, a handmade shea butter company, and I am an advocate for your self and business care.
Ah, I love it. And I am Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, and published author who helps you upgrade yourself and community care.
Yes, and together we are Women Connected in Wisdom, a podcast grounded in the 8 dimensions of wellness. Welcome
Yeah,
to today's show. Yes.
absolutely. I was, traveling last week, as our listeners know, if they listened to last week's podcast. And, it's very always funny when people ask you about what you're up to or what you're doing. And,
Mhm.
some people don't even know what podcasts are. And
Really?
like, right. Well, I got some relatives. But it was so cute because my 89-year-old great Aunt Betty said to me when she saw me, she gave me a great big hug and she said, "Honey, I love what you've been up to." She said, "I see you on social media and I just love what you're doing." Now, I don't know how all that stuff works. So I usually just give you a like, but I love it. It
Thank you
was
for the likes. Is it
right.
Aunt Betty or Grandma Betty?
It's great Aunt Betty. So thank you, Aunt Betty.
Yes, thank you, Aunt Betty. I appreciate that. I
Right.
love that. How was that for your we're talking about emotional and mental wellness. How was that comment for your emotional and mental wellness?
Right? It just made my heart smile so big,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We all need that recognition and to be seen and to
Mhm.
be, of course, we want internal validation, but that external validation is sweet too when it comes
Yeah,
along, right? When somebody
absolutely.
says, "I
Yes.
love you," and and I love my Aunt Betty. She was a world traveler in her day. And some of my favorite memories of Aunt Betty, now this is going to age me a little because we're different generations,
Yes.
but Aunt Betty used to live in the valley in Texas. And that was where they grew grapefruits and oranges. And this was
Mm.
back before like you got all the fresh produce in the
Mm.
grocery stores like we do now. And so every time Aunt Betty would come into town, she would bring giant, like probably 40-pound bags of
Wow.
grapefruits and oranges for the whole family. So I associate her with like sweetness and yummy smells and treats, like things you
Mm.
just didn't get until she rolled into town. And yeah, so I adore her. She is amazing. She was a professor. She is definitely a wise woman. So
Mm.
I love it. How
I
was
love
your week,
that.
my friend?
The week was good. It's been productive. I like to I've been focused on my time and financial consistency. So I've been looking at the systems, getting ready for this third quarter that we're about to head into, and I'm excited about what I see. I'm excited. So getting everything ready.
I love that. That is
Yes.
fantastic. Well, today we're talking about emotional and mental wellness. You want to give our listeners the definition we're working from today?
Absolutely. So, according to the University of California, emotional and mental wellness is important to be attentive to both positive and negative feelings and be able to understand how to handle these emotions. Emotional wellness also includes the ability to learn and grow from experience. Emotional well-being encourages autonomy and proper decision-making skills.
I love that.
Yeah.
Autonomy and proper decision-making skills.
hmm So for me, especially at the age that I am right now, right, feel like coming into, let's say, full adulthood. I'm not considering your age, you might still consider me a young adult. Don't have kids yet, so there's definitely not married yet. Definitely more experience to be had. But autonomy to me says who you are as an individual, and emotional and mental wellness is definitely important for that. Or I feel like we lean too far on other relationships, and now you go into unhealthy codependency and everything that can lead to. So for me, one of the things that stands out is the autonomy and then the proper decision making skills from that wellness.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think about, of course, I'm thinking about family of origin and things like
Yeah.
that. I just
Yeah.
went home, and you realize where your stuff comes from when you come
Yeah.
home, right? And
Absolutely.
so I think about that, and I come from an amazing family, and every family has stuff. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
where you come from. Every family's got stuff that creates and creates who we are as people, and whether we
Right.
deal with it or not, or acknowledge it, I think is important when we're talking about emotional and mental wellness. And before I jumped on this call, I mentioned to you and our guests that I'd just come from a therapy session, because I'm trained as a therapist. I believe in therapy, and boy, I know, like, when I go home, I need to set it up so I can process things, and I can talk about
Mm.
it. I can figure out, how am I with this, how am I with that. And I'm
Yeah.
also of the age and the generation that I'm a sandwich generation. I'm still finishing raising my young adult children, and I have parents that are aging. So
hmm
I'm caregiving on both sides. And so getting support around that is also to process that, right? To process
hmm
what that means and how we navigate those relationships, I think is important
Absolutely.
to emotional and mental wellness.
Absolutely.
And I am totally psyched to talk to our guest today.
Yeah,
Um,
no, definitely.
one of my favorite people on the planet. Are you ready for me to introduce her and to get her on the
Yes. I'm gonna say yes. I don't even know why you ask every week. I know you have to.
something else you want to talk about before I bring him on? So,
I mean, we can always talk, but women connected in wisdom. So let's
right?
introduce our guest.
Let's see who we're connected to today. I love it. So, Cynthia Phelps, PhD, is a researcher, international speaker, coach, and founder of InnerAlly, a company that builds evidence-based tools to improve resilience and well-being. She teaches about the power of having a kind and compassionate inner voice, and guides people to explore their own emotional landscapes to create customized inner support language. Dr. Phelps has 25 years of experience in digital interactive design and has been developing technologies from online classes to mobile apps to help people learn to change their behavior. You can join her and others in practicing at her Facebook group, InnerAllies, or email her at cynthia@innerally.com. And we'll be sure and put all of that on our show notes and our websites. But right now, we want to call to the stage my friend, Dr. Cynthia Phelps. Yay!
Hello.
Hey, Cynthia, Dr. Phelps.
Cynthia's just fine.
We are so glad you are with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So we're talking about emotional and mental wellness. And this is, to me, when I think about who is the expert in this field, I immediately think about you.
Mm.
So, and your company, InnerAlly. So will you tell folks a little bit about InnerAlly and the work you do in the world?
Sure. So InnerAlly was kind of born from an experience that I had where I was reading a research article, actually, and it was about this topic of self-compassion. I had never really heard of it before. It comes out of a body of psychology literature that is called positive psychology, where instead of studying people who are sick, we actually start studying people who are thriving, and then we figure out how to help others thrive. And when I read about this research, I had this both sinking feeling like, oh my goodness, I don't know anything about self-compassion. This was the topic of the research article. But then I also realized that it was something that was going to really change my life. And so that's kind of how I started down this path of InnerAlly, the company I created. As I began to read more research, I took classes. I actually became a certified teacher in something called Mindful Self-Compassion, which is a 8-week research-based program that was developed by Dr. Kristen Neff and the clinician Chris Germer. And when I was in that class and studying the self-compassion for myself, one of the things I realized was that even though I knew all about self-compassion, how it worked, I really didn't understand the inner voice. It was almost like I knew you could be kind to yourself, and I could do that with how I made decisions and how I led my life, but my inner voice was still like a mean girl. and I didn't even really understand the idea of a compassionate inner voice until I heard Kristen tell a story where in the middle of class, she put her hand over her heart and she spoke to herself, and she said she was experiencing a difficult situation. She was actually in the grocery store with her autistic son who was having a meltdown. And she put her hand over her chest and she just said to herself something along the lines of, oh, darling, this is so hard. I'm sorry you have to go through this. And I remember my mind was like, what? You can talk to yourself that way? And I was like, and instantly I realized I was missing this huge piece of the practice of self-compassion. And so that's when I was like, okay, I like to think of myself as a pretty smart person. And for me to not understand this critical component of it, I just thought, oh my gosh, there's other people out there that are like me, and I want to fix this problem.
I love that. I love that. And I love the intention of speaking to ourselves kindly. I like to say to friends, I've probably said it to both of y'all, and I know y'all have repeated it back to me sometimes. It's like, hey, don't speak to my friend that way, right? When I hear my friend saying something that's not kind to themselves, right? Shannon even called me on it right before the show because I was running around like a maniac trying to find something and talking about how much of a mess I was. And she's like, hey, aren't we talking about InnerAllies today? Be nice to my friend over there.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the very first things that I teach people when I work with them, either one-on-one or in classes, is to use that metaphor of, okay, so what if you heard a friend saying this to themselves out loud? What would you say to them to comfort them or to build them up or support them in the moment? And so that's really important. It's a great way to get yourself started.
Yeah.
Right?
What I like about what you said is I think that I've thought about how I speak to myself, right? I think I'm encouraging, you got this, or you can do this. That's on my checklist. I write it in my planner. But I don't think that there's been this space of, hey, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I know this is difficult, and maybe how I would comfort somebody if I knew somebody else was going through that. Like you said, I hadn't even thought about that. It's a good thing to think about. So if people are, because I know this is part of what you do, right? With your work, with your company, how do you help people move over from I call it speaking to themselves crazy, right? You're talking to yourself crazy to having more self-compassion. What does that transition look like?
Right. Well, the first thing I say is it's really a practice. And so if you think about, we kind of adopt our inner voice usually in childhood, either from a childhood caretaker who maybe was, said things that were, kind of mean or, whatever it was, right?
Right.
Or maybe the person taking care of us was actually mean to themselves and unkind to themselves. And so we unconsciously kind of adopt this language for ourselves until we realize we have the opportunity to look at that and assess it. And so, mindfulness of actually like what is going on in your inner voice is really a key step. And so, in addition to teaching kind of self-compassion, I also teach mindfulness on a regular basis and a lead meditation. And that really helps you, because if you're not paying attention to how you're speaking to yourself, you really don't have a fighting chance of changing it or shifting it. And compassion, if you look at the root word, it's actually compassio. It means to suffer. And so compassion is really the response to suffering. And so when this language is really the most effective is when you're having a hard time. When you sit down to write that copy for your business and that inner critic comes up and it was like, who do you think you are to be running this business? Or you say something in a meeting that embarrasses yourself, and then your inner voice is like, you're such an idiot. I can't believe you said that, right? So what we really discount is that these voices, these critical or harsh voices that we have, actually cause suffering. That's a layer of suffering on top of the suffering of making a mistake. And so I think that's a really important point. And then I guess one of the things I also help people to understand is that speaking to yourself with compassion is not the same thing as speaking positively. Sometimes it is, right? But one thing that's really important is that when you're speaking to yourself kindly, that you actually work with that language until it works for you. And so, you might have had this experience with an affirmation, something like, I am strong, I am healthy, I am wealthy, one of those types of things. And then, if you're having a good day, those really work well. But then sometimes, you just lost a client, or the check didn't come, or whatever it is, and you say, I'm wealthy, and your inner critic is like, ha, 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 ha. Whatever, right? And so that means that inner voice, that kind of positive inner voice isn't serving you at that moment. And so part of the process that I do work with people is to consider how to kind of soften that voice, work with the inner critic to make it so it's not quite so easy for it to fight with. And then also just really kind of craft it to what's going on in your personal situation at the time. And so, just a simple example is how you start your phrase, your inner phrase, if you're going to be using it as a mantra or as a way to treat yourself when you are experiencing some suffering, is if you, instead of using always the I am blah, 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 you can soften it with a may I. And so instead of saying I am wealthy, if that's not working, if that doesn't feel right in your body and your inner critic is all upset about it, then you can say, may I take steps to be wealthy? And, another thing too with language that comes out of the research is that if you have had trauma in this area in your life, maybe around finances, one of the ways that you can speak to yourself in a way that's most effective is to use third person. And so the InnerAlly kind of characters that I have work, but you can also just say something like, Cynthia, you have what it takes to build wealth, where I'm either using my own name or I'm using the you are or you are able type beginning of the phrase. And so these are some of the things that can really be helpful to get someone started on inner language.
I love that, Cynthia, because, I've worked with clients that the I am statements are too much for them at the moment. Like they can't make that leap. And so it feels like an incremental step. And it's, you mentioned your InnerAlly characters, and I want you to talk to our audience about it. And because I've been a huge fan of these cards even before they were born. Like I have been on the get these out to the people train. So I want you to tell Shannon and our listeners all about your InnerAlly cards and how we use them. And I'd love for you to draw some for us today too.
Awesome. I would love to do that. So the InnerAlly cards are based on two things. One is the self-compassion, which we've been talking about. And so they can serve as guides to help you develop your own language by seeding you with some phrases that are already there that you can modify. Makes it so much easier. Another piece of research that they're based on is something called Schema Therapy. And this is essentially a way to understand ways that people are displaying maladaptive behaviors. And so that term, it just essentially means like, how are we behaving in ways that are not serving us? And so these are some of the things that can cause problems in our lives and make it, less than delightful to be us. And so the InnerAllies are based on kind of the opposite of those maladaptive behaviors. It's kind of like, well, what do you really need emotionally to be able to thrive in life? Like, what are you missing, right? That is causing you to have that maladaptive behavior. What did you not get in childhood? And so I call these core emotional needs. When I'm talking about the InnerAllies, I call them superpowers, but they're really important because it is how you figure out what it is in you that you really need to nurture to thrive. And we've all have different experiences from, birth on. And so it's important to kind of get an idea about what core emotional needs work for us. And so one of the ways you can do that, there's a quiz on my website, who's your InnerAlly, that you can take. And that's at InnerAlly.com. I'm sure we'll put that in the show notes. But that is actually research-based quiz if you take it. So it'll help you sort that out. And so this is what the cards look like. And so if you look
at them, Cynthia, for somebody that may not be watching, but that may be listening.
That's doing the audio. Okay, so they're business-sized cards. Each of them have a character on them, and they're very typical characters that you might find in like an adventure or in some kind of video game. They're archetype characters basically, and they're paired each with a core emotional need. And so there's 16 of them. And so right now I'm holding the captain, and that core emotional need is freedom. And so here's what's written on the card for the captain. So this is a little description. It says, I am free to make choices that serve me. I help you set boundaries that lead to self-respect and healthy relationships. And so this is all about kind of plotting your own course in the world, like being your own captain. And it's one of the core emotional needs that people can nurture for themselves. And so there's no wrong core emotional need for, you can use all 16 to make your life better. And if you're watching this on the video, this is the back side of the card, and you can see that it has lines on it. And the idea behind that is that this is really about you crafting that custom inner language that really works for you, and not just having to use something out of the box.
I love that so much. And I'm also on your website taking the quiz because I've never done that before. So
how is that even possible? You haven't taken the quiz.
Right? I know we've done workshops in person before, and I love, there's so many that I love in that deck, but the grandmother is one of my favorite cards. I know she's one of your favorites too. The artist, the healer, y'all, if you get a chance, go to Cynthia's website and look at the cards and take the quiz. And yeah, because they're not, to me, sometimes, because I've been doing self-help stuff for since I could read, because I love it, right? I love taking quizzes. I love doing different things. And it's fun. Your InnerAlly cards are a way to play with that inner critic and play with, like, I always kind of ask myself before I draw one, who do I need today to be the best version of me? And it never fails. It pulls it up. I read it. I'm like, oh yeah, let's go for it. So it's like having a ride along buddy in your pocket, it's like, here we go.
And that's really how they're designed, is to really just be a guide for you and a support system for you. Because for me, and I think for a lot of other people, when we start doing self-help stuff, a lot of times it's awkward. And when I tried to first speak to myself in this kind or a nurturing voice like Kristen had in her story, it just like felt wrong. I felt like I didn't have permission to do it. And so this system really helps you kind of get over some of those humps. And, one of the things that I can do for your listeners is I can provide you with the PDF of these cards. And so let's make sure we make that happen.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that would be really awesome. Shannon, I know you have some more questions.
I was wondering, do we want to pull a card for Shannon?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's pull a card.
All right, let's see. Just shuffling the deck.
Okay.
To see what
I love a
comes
good
up
shuffle.
And you got one of my I always say that one of my favorite cards. This is the Innocent, and so her superpower is actually acceptance, self-acceptance. And so she is very powerful. Even though she looks like a small girl playing on this card, she's super powerful because she is the opposite of perfectionism. And so she says, I accept myself the way I am, even with my imperfections. I help you set realistic standards for yourself, approaching challenges with curiosity and play.
I love it.
So if you have any challenges coming up, the Innocent tells you have the opportunity to not just see it as a goal or a task, but actually as something you can get curious and playful about.
Yeah, and that's genuinely how I look at learning now. I think that as adults, learning and going through new situations can be anxiety provoking. It could be overwhelming, and it causes a lot of emotions depending on what the situations are. But if we look at it as not a loss, but a lesson, and what is it supposed to teach me? For me personally, it does help me stay playful. But I love that I got the little girl, because when I was little, I did not want to be called a little girl. I'm not a little girl. No little kid wants to be called little. But doing this podcast, I realized maybe it was because I didn't like the way they described girls. Maybe it was because of the way that they described little girls, So I really like the card. I like the card that you picked for me, and the idea and the cards themselves in general. And especially the fact that they're based on research. I appreciate you making sure that it's, again, backed by science and backed by things that work and that actually help.
Thank you, Shannon.
So I just got the results from my quiz.
What does it say?
Shocked, y'all.
Did you get the healer?
Of course, I got the healer and self-care. So who is the healer? The healer has the power of self-care. They encourage to help balance one's need for sustainable wellness. There she is. Oh, good. There you go. Oh, yeah.
The healer.
One of my favorite cards that I use all the time. And so, this is my work in the world with self and community care, but you're going to love this, Shannon, because it's the words associated with the healer are self-respect, mutuality, and self-kindness. And we all need to take care of ourselves. The healer is here to encourage you to take excellent care of yourself Sometimes it's necessary to care for someone who is sick or needy. In fact, it can feel really good to sacrifice or take care of others. But sometimes we can experience guilt or resentment when we forget to take care of ourselves. The healer reminds you that you have to care for yourself if you want to be effective in caring for others. So, yeah, she rides with me often.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important, especially when I think about your book, Christine, Stillpoint. And again, I love the research behind it and the numbers, the statistics you ladies give. But when it was talking about caregiving having an effect on the caregiver's body up until 3 years after the caregiving is done, and most time for caregivers, it overlaps with different people. So if the healer is not being intentional about taking care of herself, that's just like you said, Cynthia, adding on the layers of the way that the situation could be harming you. So I love that.
Right? It's so true. And so many, one of the reasons we wrote that book is because professional caregivers are often the worst about caring for themselves. It's like doctors and nurses who you see smoking or eating junk food. Like it is one of the pitfalls of that profession is we get so busy taking care of other people that we don't check in with ourselves. So I love, Cynthia, that you have a card in there that reminds us, hey, you.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, heal thyself. I like that. And Christine, I know you said I have more questions. I do. So Cynthia, we just talked about professional caregivers, right? What I think about are caregivers that aren't professional. That's the biggest industry that's underpaid when we talk about people taking care of homes and sick relatives and these situations. So on your website, it talks about burnout. Could we talk a little bit more about that and what that looks like to have a healthy balance with what you're doing and not being burnt out and self-compassion at the same time?
Absolutely. One of the things that's really important for anybody who is a caregiver, is to buy Christine's book. No. Totally. And, to understand, in life, we take on challenges often. Sometimes they feel like they're thrown at us. Sometimes we feel like we're stuck in them. And in those places, what we kind of forget about is that we really have a lot of autonomy. In fact, we have like 100% autonomy of how we speak to ourselves in our head. And so oftentimes caregiving comes with a chunk of suffering. Either you're feeling the pain of the person who is in pain that you're caring for, or you're feeling that suffering. Or you are burnt out because you have too much on your plate. You didn't sign up to be a caregiver, and here you are, right? And so that is kind of the pain of life that's inescapable to a certain extent. But one things that we do, especially with our inner voice, is like we take that pain here and then we add another layer of suffering over the top. And that is how we speak to ourselves. And so, if you're a caregiver and you've taken on the role of caring for someone in your family and you are telling yourself this story, like, I can't believe that I'm stuck caring for this person, where you are saying words to yourself that like you would never say to somebody that you would hire to care for the person, And so I think that one of the things that we can really do to not only kind of help us avoid burnout to a certain extent is to really use that mindfulness of what is our relationship with ourselves around caring for this other person. And what does that sound like? And if you dig in there, sometimes I like to say it's like a box. And so you kind of have to dig in and see some of the suffering that we have created for ourselves and kind of take it out and work with it a little bit. And so that's where using inner allies to help you create some kind and supportive language that works in the opposite direction, right, of the inner like critic or the one that's just a bummer right on the inside.
Yeah.
And so that can be really helpful because, one other quick point is that when you practice this, self-compassionate language, this inner ally language, it's important that that you're supporting yourself, and it's not necessary that you like crush the inner critic or throw it out, or you don't have to have a combative relationship with it. You can kind of just be like, oh, I see you, I'm aware of you now. Sometimes I like to use the metaphor of like putting it up on the shelf, and so it's not here, it's kind of over here, and then building some other language up that's in there as well. So that's one thing that I would say, that the inner ally language can really help you as a caregiver, and it all happens on the inside of you.
Right. I love that, Cynthia. I love when you're saying having intention around it and even noticing it, because I've worked with people and have friends that didn't even realize they were criticizing themselves. Like,
that was me.
Yeah. And it's like, what do you mean? Like I'm being mean to myself? Because they don't realize that it's harsh language, or that they're being unkind, or that, and sometimes I catch myself, like somebody will say, you're being really hard on yourself. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because I'm not saying it in a mean way, but I'm like expecting too much of myself. Like it would not be something that I would ever say to a friend, like you're not doing enough, or you only worked 14 hours. You didn't put in that, things that you're like, what? That's crazy talk, right? Like Shannon says. And so having really just the paying attention to start with about what is that inner voice that is driving the bus that we may not even be paying attention to.
And here's a quick tip. When you do raise your awareness around it, like try to avoid adding an extra layer of judgment, right? Like try not to like be like beat yourself up for beating yourself up, right? Like this is your moment to give yourself a break, right? And to consider a different path. I like the metaphor of self-compassion. It just cracks open the door to having a different relationship with yourself, a different possibility. Like it doesn't shove you through the door like say a positive affirmation might try to. I
love me a good positive affirmation.
Shove it right through the door. And some days those work, right? Some days they don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a good thing, like to have, I always talk about having different tools in our toolkit. Like there are a lot, I am really grateful to have a lot of different tools in my toolkit that I can reach around and pick out what works for that day or for that moment or for that situation. And I definitely consider your inner ally cards part of my toolkit. I use them with my clients and I use them for myself. I usually have one sitting up in front of my desk for this is what I need for today, or the week. Sometimes I pull one for the week, but yeah. Shannon, you look like you had a question.
I did. One, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So you said something, Cynthia. Let me see. I take copious notes that I wanted to hit on. We prevented burnout. We talked about that. You said you have 100% autonomy of how you speak to yourself in your head. I love that. But that is not what my question was.
That popped out.
Okay, so
can I say something real quick?
Wasn't it?
Well, because it links into the definition. When it talks about emotional well-being, encourages autonomy and proper decision-making skills. So what you're talking about was self-compassion, and with that we have 100% autonomy about how we speak to ourselves feeds right into the emotional wellness.
Yeah. Yep, and how we think about it. So that leads to my question, right? The mindfulness versus self-compassion. I want to make sure that I understand the difference. So in my mind right now, mindfulness is being able to see things when they happen, right? You're aware of what's going on. You catch yourself when you're doing certain things, whether they be self-sabotage habits or talking to yourself crazy or whatever it is. And then self-compassion, like you said, is that piece where the voices are there when you're actually suffering, right? Because of the root word of compassion. So is that the difference? Mindfulness is all the time being aware, and then self-compassion is coming in on the pain point.
Yeah, I think that yes. And so mindfulness is a pretty passive thing. You're kind of being in this state of awareness. You have an ability to direct your attention, but you're not really doing anything. And so compassion is really this urge to see, when you see suffering, to make it better. And so, it's really easy for us to understand that, if we, are out somewhere and we see a little kid fall down in front of us and skin their knee, like it's super, we just go up to them and be like, honey, are you okay? Let me scoop you up and let me see like how it is, how are you, like we have this innate urge to help each other. This is like how we are wired so that we can be social beings. And so it's like about taking those types of thoughts and actions and support and kindness, and then turning that in towards ourselves. And so I see self-compassion as being an active practice.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I have my wisdom in action, Christine. We talk about what we're going to do. I think I'm getting a little bit clearer on the difference.
Yeah, every week, Cynthia, we do a hashtag wisdom in action about what we're taking from the week's topic or our guest. And we say, okay, this is what I'm doing with that this week. So when you think about wisdom in action, when you think about emotional and mental wellness, like what is something you could commit to this week about a wisdom in action? If you had to hashtag a wisdom in action.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is important for me is to use both mindfulness and self-compassion to keep an eye on my reactivity. So when people say things that kind of get under my skin, or, if I know I'm walking into a situation where people have triggered me in the past, then I think that would be a really good challenge for me to take on, because I know I have some of that coming up. And and so one of the great things about practicing mindful self-compassion, and really mindfulness is baked in as a component of self-compassion, is that you get a chance to pause between the stimulus and the response. And so so what I'm interested in practicing, or even more so, is when something is said to me that makes me feel an emotion that I don't want to feel, anger or disappointment or sadness, frustration, then I would like to lengthen that pause and be kind to myself, because what was said was something that hurt me in some way.
So your wisdom in action is lengthening the pause.
Lengthen the pause.
Lengthen the
pause in love.
In love. Oh.
I really like it. I like that.
Oh, I love that. Here comes the train. So I love that. Shannon, what is your wisdom in action this week? What are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about self-compassion. I've been really intentional about mindfulness. I think I do a great job at seeing stuff when it happens, even knowing why it happened, a lot of times. But I can be like the caring coach, she's going to say it in a nice way, but she might not be nice, like she might not be, I'll say she might not be compassionate. She might not be, I'm sorry that you're going through this right now. I understand how you feel. and it's okay to take the time. She might not always sound like that. Okay, I see it, now keep going. And so the self-compassion piece, whatever that looks like, I'm going to start paying more attention to it.
Right. I think my is I'm hitting the reset button because I just went back home for a week, and sometimes we fall into roles or patterns of behavior with our family of origin that we've gotten away from, and so I'm hitting the reset button on that, and resetting, being kinder to myself, and this week, and just being a little gentler with myself. I'm also out of routine. So I notice when I get out of routine from travel, or, my sister and I were talking this week, and both of us are, how did she put it? She said, we are under socialized extroverts, and we're getting back out here as we reemerge. And she said, it's awkward. It's really awkward, and it's really weird. And how are the introverts doing? Or how are the people who were socially awkward before the pandemic doing, right? Like, they may be thriving because they've been able to be online or find their people. But I'm just going to be kinder with myself as this reemergence happens, and as this, and when I am awkward, when I forget how to behave out in public because it's been a minute. So I think that's right. So, Cynthia, we are almost out of time, my friend, and we are going to definitely in the show notes tell people how to find you. But how do you like people to best find you?
Well, the two ways that I love people to find me is through the website, InnerAlly.com. And my email's on there, cynthia@innerally.com. And that's the way, like, if you want to get that PDF we were talking about with all these beautiful inner allies on it, that is the way to get that PDF, is to shoot me an email. And then the other thing that is super fun is if you are on Facebook, we do have that group called Inner Allies. And I love posting fun and inspirational stuff that helps us to keep these practices up.
I can vouch for that because I've been a member of that group probably since it started or almost started. And really great stuff, y'all, that will make your day. And then she'll post some research stuff that it'll blow your mind. You're like, what? So check that out for sure. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. This has been such a good conversation. I feel like there's so much, I feel like I may have to go back and re-listen to this episode because there was so much juiciness in there.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to have been invited. Thank you so much, ladies.
You are welcome. We are going to send you to the green room, and I'm sorry it's virtual, which means there is no chocolate and coffee, but I bet I know somebody that can. So see you later. Oh my gosh, how fun was that?
Right? I feel better prepared. I'm more equipped now. Yes, thank you, Cynthia.
I always feel that way after talking to Cynthia, and I really do. I'm not just blowing smoke about these cards, y'all. I use them all the time, and I have been. I got one of her first decks as a prototype. And I was like, everybody's got to have these. And of course, I love cards. I love the tactile. I love being able to have something that I can see. And, I've done different things that have been on my cell phone but I like just propping something up on my bathroom mirror or on my computer mirror. What stuck out to you about the convo today?
I mean, are you asking me for one thing, or because I have a list?
I know you have a list. Top three things that stuck out.
Okay. So top three. Number one, because this is like, what is it? It's like Toastmasters. She used one of the words, right? So because she used autonomy, I'll say the top one is we have 100% autonomy of how we speak to ourselves in our heads. I love that. You might not be able to help being a caregiver.
Our social graphics. That one's coming up.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It definitely is. That's what did she say? I had to write it down. Yes. So that one. What else? I love when she was talking about what do you need to be emotionally supported. We talk about again, this is why all 8 dimensions are so important. This is why we decided to talk about one each week and not just a few of them that people talk about most of the time, because I don't think that we usually think about that. If I'm thinking about support, I might be thinking about physically, somebody needs somewhere to stay, or they might need something to eat, or financially, they need some money, or even socially, they might need to talk. But how do you support them emotionally? I love that. And the third one, I would say that speaking to yourself kindly is not the same as self-compassion. Because I was also surprised, just like Cynthia, when I heard about positive psychology for the first time. And that was after I had my psychology degree. I said, how do I have a whole 4-year degree, graduated with honors in psychology, and I had never heard of positive psychology before?
Right.
And so I've been mindful of speaking kindly to myself. So to find out that that's not the same as self-compassion, okay, we have some more work to do, and I'm looking forward to it. And I love the show, and I look forward to the cards. Flashcards are really helpful for a lot of people. So I look forward to getting those in some people's hands too.
Right. Well, I bet I can hook you up, my friends. So we'll get you a set of cards, and these are beautifully done, and the artwork is spectacular on them too. So
Yeah,
I
the
can't
colors are great.
till you see them in person. Well, before we jump off of here, because I know we're almost out of time, will you tell us? Last week we talked about you announcing the Shearo of the month for the month
Yes.
of May. So will you tell us, first of all, tell our listeners what a Shearo is, and about our sponsor,
Yes.
ShealoGlo, and then let's announce the May winner.
Absolutely. So, if you do not know, if you're new to Women Connected in Wisdom podcast, our sponsor is ShealoGlo, my shea butter company. And it's exactly what we're talking about, wellness, right? We do all this stuff every day. We put on clothes, drink water, try to get enough sleep. But did you put something on your skin? Were you intentional about how you took care of yourself before you went and took care of everybody else? So, the mission of ShealoGlo is to help women be intentional about their daily self-care, right? And the Shearo is to honor women, to give a free gift of self-care to somebody in your community who does a knockout job at doing all these things for everybody else, but she may need a little help doing it for herself. And we want to honor those women. And for May, our Shearo is Carolyn Renee. Carolyn Renee. She was one of our guests on the show. Again, if you're an avid listener, yes, you already know who Carolyn Renee is. But she's a mother, a business owner. Let me see, I wrote her stuff. She organizes things in the community in East Point and supports activists and artists through her different projects and ventures that she's on. So when she was on Women Connected in Wisdom, she talked about the intergenerational wellness that she's worked on in her family with her and her daughters. I love that story. And for everything that she does in the community, we're going to honor her for May. So if you would like to get more specific information about her company and the different things that she does, go to Women Connected in wisdom.com. Her information is there. And also follow ShealoGlo. Her information will be there once we announce the winners. But you ladies are the first to hear it. And if you have somebody that you would like to nominate to get a free gift of self-care, email MyShearo to ShealoGlo@gmail.com, and I'll be sure to put her in the nominations for next month.
Right. I love that. I love that Carolyn Renee was picked for May, because she's the executive director over at Arts Exchange and a business owner for women helping others achieve. And she just gives so much to her community. I'm grateful that ShealoGlo is sending her a care package. I think that's awesome.
Yes. Yes.
Well, we are here again another week, another awesome guest, a great conversation, my friends.
Yes. And ladies, as always, thank you so much for joining us, for downloading and tuning in. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, make sure that you be well, be wise, be whole. We'll see you next week at 5.
See you soon.